Hello everyone. So welcome back to your channel Data Science with Harshit. My name is Harshit Tyagi. I'm a data science instructor and mentor. So in the previous videos, we have seen how to set up your Python environment, how to work with different kind of notebooks, Jupyter notebooks, Google Collaboratory, and others. So now we are all set to dive right into programming and learn Python to get started with data science. So I have broken down the Python fundamentals series into three parts, and in this video we are going to cover the part one where we're going to talk about variables, different data types, some operators, basic operators, arithmetic operators, as well as some string formatting options and string operators. We'll learn about lists, how lists work, and what sort of operations can you perform with the Python lists. So Python Fundamentals Part 1 coming right up. Now Python is a very simple and very easy to learn language because of its straightforward and explicit syntax. Now we can use Python, we can get started with it without any boilerplate code that we need in other languages like C and C++. So I'm here in my terminal. I have my Python environment running and I am in this folder DSWH. So let's create a new folder, new directory for this particular series on Python fundamentals. Okay, mkdir Python fundamentals. Let me change the directory to Python fundamentals. All right, now the next thing that we need to do is start our Jupyter notebook server. So Jupyter notebook, and this will take a few seconds to give us the link. All right, so this is where the server is, the notebook should be running. All right, so I am here. I do not have anything in this particular Python fundamentals folder since I just created it. Now the next thing that I need to do is create a Python 3 notebook. All right, so this has created a new notebook which has been named untitled. So let's first change the name of our notebook. So this is Python fundamentals part 1. Awesome, so the name has been changed. Our notebook is ready to use. So the first thing that we do while learning any language, any programming language, is print hello world. So in Python we can use the print function. So we have print function which we can use, parenthesis. Now you type in the string that you want to print, so hello world. So let's run this. You can run this by hitting shift plus enter on your keyboard or the run icon over here. So I printed hello world, and this is how this particular cell has given its output. Now let's say if we talk about input output, so next thing that we need is to take some input from the user, and we can use the input function. So this input function prompts the user to enter the value, and if I enter something like let's say data science and hit enter, simple, so this shows me that this is a particular string which is data science. So that was about input output. So Python doesn't use curly braces like other languages. It uses indentation to block its code, and it accepts both tabs as well as spaces. Now the standard is that it uses 4 spaces. So let's say I have this variable called a, which I assign the value of 5, and let's say if I have to add a conditional block, let's say I check if a equals 5, and then I add a colon and I hit enter. This gives me 4 spaces. This means that I have entered into this if conditional block. Now everything that I write inside would be treated under this if conditional block. So let's say I print a equals 5. So this would, if I run this, I have this a equals 5 printed, since the value of a is 5. So you can see that I have uh, 4 indented spaces to this block of code. Now the next thing is different data types. So how do you define, or how do you find out what the data type of a particular variable is? So let's say I have this string called let's say my string, and I add hello world to this, and I want to know what the data type of my variable is. So let's say let's print the type of my string variable. So I can use this type function, which which returns the type, the data type of that particular variable. So if I run this, so this has given us class string. So this means that my string is a class string object. And simply, so let's say there is a variable called n, which we assign a value of 10, and if it print the type of n, this gives us a class int. So this is basically an integer class object. Now let's say there is another number called n float, and to this we assign 7.5, and if I print the type of n underscore float, so this is a floating class object, n float. So we've seen string, integer, float, floating point variables. So you see that in Python we do not have to define the type or the data type of these variables, that this is a string or this is an integer or this is a floating point number. So Python is completely object oriented, and it is not statically typed like other languages like C++ or C, in which you have to compile your code. This is a dynamic and interpreted language. So we do not have to define the data type of each of these variables. And in Python we have two different types of numbers, integers and floating point, and then we have strings. Now to talk about strings, we have two ways to define strings. Now the first is, let's say I have single quote strings, where let's say I type this is a single quote string, and I print single quote string, and this has given me the string, which is, this is a single quote string. Now the other way is to define a double quote string. So let's say this is a double quote string, and I define it like this. So here the difference is that if you want to add an apostrophe, so you won't be able to do that. So let's say if I want to add write it like it is a single quote string, so this will end the string right over here, and if you run this, this will give you a syntax error. So you won't be able to add apostrophe in a single quote string, and whereas you will be able to do that in a double quote string. So yeah, so it hasn't given you any error, and if you print this, so you get it's a double quote string. So that works just fine for us. Now let's try to learn about different kind of operations that we can perform on these numbers. So let's say I have n1, which is, let's say it's 5, and then we have n2, let's assign it 7.5, and now if I want to print, let's say add these two numbers, n1 plus n2, so run this, shift plus enter on your keyboard, and this has given you 12.5. so I had one integer point variable, one floating point variable, and when I add them up, so this I get is a floating point number 12.5. Now let's say I define a new string and string, and let's put ABC in it, and now let's try to add this to a number which is n1, let's say. And if we run this, so this gives us an error that can only concatenate string and not integer to string. So we are trying to concatenate, we are trying to add an integer to a string, so it has given us this type error. All right, and let's say I have an str2 which is def, and now if I try to add an str1 plus an str2, and if I run this, so an str1, okay, so let's just rename it, okay, okay, and if I run this, so I get a b c d e f. So I've got these two strings added, concatenated. So this is how string addition works. Now if I want to assign two variables at the same time, I can simply do n1 comma n2, or if you want to swap two numbers, you can do that. So in n1 I have 5 over here, in n2 I have 7.5. so let's say I want to swap these numbers, so I simply write n1 equals n2 and n2 equals n1, separated by comma. Now if I want to check n1, it has 7.5 inside it, so the values have swapped, so you can again check n2. All right, and if in case you want to assign some different values, you can also do that. So let's say I use assign 10 and 11. So now if you just run this, you see n1 contains 10, which is the first value, and 2 is contains 11, which is the corresponding value. So this is how you can assign values separated by comma. And so let's look at a few arithmetic operators that we can use. So let's say if we can see the Damas rule, so let's try to evaluate an expression. So we have result equals, let's say, 3 plus 4.0 divided by 2 multiplied by 5. Now as per the Damas rule, we should have the division first. So the value of this expression should be 4 divided by 2 into 5 10, 10 plus 3 13. Now let's try to print the result. Result, I should get 13. Awesome. So I have my result as 13. So we can see that the arithmetic operators plus, multiply, divide, subtract all work as we expect. Now the other operator that we can use is the modulo operator. So this is modulo operator, which is denoted by a percentage. Now let's say this is basically used to calculate the remainder. So let's say I want to divide 17 by 10 and find out the remainder. So we know that the answer should be 7. So let's look at what it gives us. Awesome. So this remainder or the modulo operator works just fine as expected. Let's look at other operator, which is the power. So let's say I want to evaluate an expression x raised to the power n. So how do I do that in Python? So let's say I have x equals 5, n equals 4, and if I want to evaluate x to the power n, so all I need to do is x double asterisk and n. So this expression is basically x raised to the power n. So 5 raised to the power 4 is 625, and if I run this, awesome, so I have 625, 5 raised to the power 4 as my answer. And if you want to look at how these operators work on strings, so let's say I have a string called ABC, and if let's say I multiply it by 10, so what do you think should be printed? So is it like ABC into 10. So will it give us an error or what? So let's try and run this. So this has concatenated 10 ABC strings, and these are 10. So in case you want to find out what's the length of a particular string, you can use the len function. So you just pass on the string. So let's store this in another string, answer, and if let's run this, and if you want to find out what's the length of this answer, this is, so we have 30. So 3 is the length of this nstr, and if we multiply it by 10, it gives us a concatenated string of 10 abcs. And then if we find out the length of answer, and this is basically 30, 3 into 10, so length of our answer string is 30. So now let's talk about some string formatting options and operators that we can use to manipulate strings. So Python uses C style string formatting to create new formatted strings. So let's say I have a name variable, which is a string, let's say Harshit, and I want to print a formatted string where I don't know the name of the person yet. So I use so this percentage s, this is an argument specifier, percentage s, and let's say is a data scientist. So percentage s is a data scientist, and I use provide the name of the variable at the end. So this is how I format the string. So I should have Harshit is a data scientist as my answer. So if you run this, you see the name has been put in place of this argument, and I have Harshit is a data scientist printed for me. Now the other operations that you can perform to manipulate your strings are basically, let's say if you want to convert your string to uppercase, so you can simply use name dot upper, so you can invoke the upper function. So this will basically convert your string to uppercase. So you see that Harshit has been printed in capital, and in case you want to convert it into lowercase, you can use the lower function. And let's say you have another string and str equals it is a nice day today. So if you have this string, so let's say you want to capitalize this string, so you can use the capitalize function. So if you run this, so you see that the first letter of the sentence has been capitalized, is converted into uppercase. So this I is capitalized. So you can use the capitalize function like this. Now there are other functions, so let's talk about string slicing. So slicing is an important technique that you would use in Python lists as well, which we're going to talk about in a bit. So let's say you have a string called name, and which is already defined. So in name we have Harshit, and in case you find out, you want to find out at which index is s present. So you want to find out at which index of the string is s present. So this index function basically gives you the index at which the character is present, the first appearance of that character. So I have s at third position. So the indexing of any string starts from 0 on and not 1. So at 0 I have h, at first index I have a, second index I have r, and s is present at the third index. All right, now if you talk about slicing, so in slicing what you need to do is you need to mention the starting index, all right, and the ending index. So this will basically slice your string from second index up till the fourth index. This fifth index is not included, so this is excluded. So this is how your string is now printed. So you can see at second index I have R present, and at fourth index, third, fourth, I have H present. So RSH has been printed for me. Now in case you want to print 2 is to 6, but you want to skip a number in between, so you can mention the step size by which you want to jump. So this will print R and H started from second index and then ended at the fifth index, which is this ending index -1, and the step size is 2, so it will skip 1 in between. So I started from R, skipped S, and then printed H, but it has reached the fifth index, so the string has ended over here. So this is starting index, this is my ending index, and this is the step size. How you want to jump, you can mention is 2, 3, 4. So similar operation you would be performing with less as well in a bit. So these are basically the commonly used operations that you would use in string, but there would be other operations that you can learn from the official documentation page, as you can find in the description below. So let's now talk about Python lists. Now these are very similar to arrays in C, C++, but the major difference is that they can contain any type of a variable. So let's see how we can define lists. So let's say I have my list called a list equals, I enter 3, 4, 5 inside of it, and if I want to print this list, I simply do print a list, and this has printed all the variables, basically all the elements of my list. Now I can do a bunch of tasks, and also to see the major difference between these Python lists and the arrays, so you can do this in Python lists. So let's say I want to store Harshit, and then I want to store 2, then I want to store 5.5. so this is all valid for Python list. Sorry, print a list, and you see my first element is a string, my second element is an integer, my third element is a floating point number. So I can use a bunch of functions in the list data type. Let's say I want to add or append a number to my list. So let's say I want to append 10 at the end. So if I append and then let's use append a few more, 15, and then if I print my list, you see 10 and 15 have been added at the end of my list. And in case I want to delete, or here we use the pop function, so I can use the pop function, and now if I print, so this pop function basically deletes or pops out the last element of my list. So you see 15 has been deleted from my list. Now in order to access any element of my list, any particular element, so let's say, so again here the indexing starts from 0, so the Harshit is basically my 0th element. So if I want to access the first element of my list, I would use the 0th index. So if I run this, I get Harshit, which is the first element of my list. And similarly, if I print the fourth, I get list index out of range, because fourth index is not available in my list. I only have 4 elements, so the last index would be 3. So that's how indexing works. And similar to strings, I can use slicing here as well. So let's say I want to capture all my elements except the first, so all I need to do is simply 1 colon and do not enter anything after that. So if you run this, so the first element has been skipped since that was the 0th, and this is inclusive, so I have 2, second, basically the first index, the second index, and the third index. Everything after the first index. Starting index, ending index I have not specified, so it will go up till the end. So this is how you can use slicing in lists as well. Another important and interesting thing that you would want to know is that a list can also contain a list inside. So let's say you want to append a list at the end, so you can also do that. So let's see what we'll have if we do that. You see a list has been appended at the end as well. So my list can have any type of variable inside my list. So it's an interesting data structure to work with. So if I use multiplication operator, so let's say I multiply the list by 2, I get, so this basically replicates my appends the entire list twice. So I multiplied it by twice. If I would have multiplied it by 3, so there would have been 3 replications. And similarly, I can also perform addition. So if I do a list plus a list, so this also gives me the same thing. So these are a bunch of functions and techniques and operators that you can use to manipulate your list. So to wrap it up, we've seen what are the different data types and what all different operations that we can perform on them. Now you can find the link to all the work that we have done. I've added the link of my GitHub repository as well as the Google Collaboratory notebook, which you can refer to. Now your task is to get comfortable with these data types and get some hands-on practice using these operators on different sort of data types. And I've also added the link to the Python official documentation page. So if you want to learn more about different kind of other functions that are available for each of these, you can definitely do that. And in the next video, we're going to talk about loops, modules and packages, and object-oriented programming in Python. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Feel free to comment down below if you have any concern, any thought, any suggestion for the upcoming videos. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on the upcoming parts. So till then, keep learning data science with Harshit. Thanks.